traveled to a non-English speaking country before, aside from that one time when I went to Tijuana, Mexico with my parents as a kid. I had no idea what to expect, and when my friend found us an insanely good deal on a full round-trip package to Machu Picchu, I couldn't say no. We opted in for the Salkantay Trek instead of the Inca Trail for a more serene and relaxing journey to the ancient city. It sees about a quarter the number of tourists, and it stretches for almost double the distance, perfect for hikers. Plus, it doesn't require booking nearly as far in advance. However, it's the Inca Trail that was the historic route to the mountaintop. We received our packing list about a month in advance of departure. The tour did include all of the core essentials for camping, like the tent, sleeping bag, and pad. We just had to make sure to take care of personal essentials like clothing, cameras, battery backups, and personal hygiene items. While no vaccinations were required for entry, altitude sickness pills were absolutely crucial. My home city was about 350 meters above sea level, and we would be climbing to an excess of 4,200 meters. You will feel the difference in shortness of breath as you hike, even for the most fit. The best deals for Peru adventures are usually during the rainy season, November to April. On top of that, we opted in for the insanely long journey via New York in favor of better ticket prices. Now that was a mistake. It took us 52 hours to get to Cusco from Western Canada. We almost didn't make it amidst the chaos and closures due to Hurricane Sandy in New York. By the time we finally did arrive at our destination, my brain had melted. However, we did massively luck out on the weather for the rest of the trip. And being in the capital city of the former Incan Empire, that was pretty cool. We met up with our guides and the other tourists that we would be spending the next week with. They were mostly Americans looking for the same life-changing experience. And after a short stop in at the local village for any last-minute supplies from civilization, the journey began. The first day was by far the hardest. It was a make-it-or-break-it experience where technically it would still be possible to turn around for anyone unable to complete. The porters loaded all of the gear onto mules and we headed out to our first lunch spot, passing a scattering of homes along the last stretch of dirt road. A British woman that was with our group became irate as the incline started to become more challenging. She thought she had booked herself into a luxury multi-day trip, not a backpacking adventure. Someone didn't read the descriptions. Her frustrations grew increasingly erratic when she wasn't able to effectively communicate with the guides. I offered to translate into Spanish using my iPad, and she retaliated furiously by saying, "I'm English, they can learn my language." We were in their country, we were their guests. Hell, they were even packing out our portable toilet deposits. I couldn't believe what she was saying. It wasn't long before she got her way and they sent her back on a mule. I've never been more embarrassed to be a tourist. The first campsite was at the base of the 6,200 meter Salkantay Mountain. We had gone from lush tropical looking scenery to tiny shrubs and trickling streams reminiscent of the Canadian Alpine. The mountains around us, they were even snow-capped. The porters did all of the hard work by setting up camp, putting up and taking down tents, disposing of waste, and cooking meals. Meals were very light and often consisted of bread, beans, rice, tomato, avocado, and cucumber. And the pace of the group was very diverse. I would often be over an hour ahead of the group. I'm sure the guides weren't loving me for that one. Some opted into even riding the mules during the steeper sections of the trail. But that gave me plenty of time to really get to know my travel buddies at the head of the pack. I taught them how to play Johnny Bagel, a famous backpacker's card game, also known as Shithead. Being stubborn and neglecting to use bug spray was one of the worst mistakes that I made. During our descent towards what felt like the tropics, we passed massive aloe plants, waterfalls, and tiny little villages. We even got to try some edible bush fruit along the way. But not before the backs of my legs began to itch. I didn't notice until it was too late, and I was freckled in hundreds of little gnat bites. Another member of our team began to scratch, and he wound up with a wicked infection. One of the small villages we came across, I was incredibly far ahead, and I decided to use my iPad to translate and ask if I could pay someone to use a shower to clean up. I typed in a quick translation from English to Spanish and showed it to one of the locals. She looked confused. My friend eye-rolled and pulled me aside and ignorantly said, "Josh, they live in the mountains. They probably don't know how to read and definitely don't know what an iPad is." I glared at her for the rude commentary. Though, in the end, she wasn't entirely wrong. As it would turn out, they didn't know how to read or even speak Spanish at all. They still spoke the traditional Quechua language. Impressively, upwards of 25% of Peruvians still speak it today. Our guide gave us some options and we cheated a little bit. We hitched a van ride for part of our journey, as the group consensus was that we wanted the detour to Santa Teresa to use the hot springs. Wine, Pringles, pop, chocolate bars, and all the other luxury items that we could have ever wanted. We binged before doing a relatively flat walk along the edge of the river towards the hydroelectric dam, where we would say goodbye to our guides and hitch a short train commute to the tourist town of Aguas Calientes. We tipped amply and also exchanged some international currency and other souvenir trinkets. I've never seen anyone so amused by a Canadian toonie before. Maybe we really do have some weird money up here. Peru is known for its exotic animal meats, and that was one of our first meals when we got to Aguas Calientes. When the host brought out the cooked guinea pig, a local delicacy, I nearly gagged. I had one growing up. They're not often kept as pets in Peru. I couldn't do it, but that didn't stop the rest of my table from playing with it and eventually chowing down. It was time for me to have some ceviche instead, which is a lemon-lime infused fish dish with onions, chili peppers, salt, and pepper. Washing it down with the other local favorite, pisco sour. It's a type of brandy with lime juice and egg whites. Hiram Bingham III, a real-life adventurer, albeit not archaeologist that Indiana Jones was modeled after, he discovered Machu Picchu in 1911. After being guided to it by local farmers, he believed it was the lost city of the Incas. As time would go on, archaeologists would later acknowledge that it was an estate for the then emperor. And on top of that, it was only an estate for 80 years until the Spanish stormed in. However, it did house upwards of 750 people. Bingham may have gotten a lot wrong about this in his original reports, but his tales did bring in a lot of funding, which towed in the real experts. It did seem a little wrong to take the bus to the top of the mountain after all that hiking, but that was a story unto itself. The path snakes back and forth through tons of switchbacks, and it almost feels like a single-lane road. The tour buses almost scrape against each other or seem like they're going to tip over the side of the cliff as they pass side by side. Now, that was one way to get my heart pumping, if the excitement of being in my Indiana Jones costume going to ancient ruins wasn't enough already. There is a lot to see. My top picks for roaming the ruins at the summit were, first, the water mirrors. Bingham thought of them as mortars to grind potatoes and corn, and others thought they could even be used for ritual sacrifice and retaining blood. Or perhaps divination. Another possible explanation, though, an astronomical tool. Number 2, the hundreds of artificial terraces were engineered for farming and drainage to prevent erosion. The mountaintop is normally drenched with over 70 inches of rain annually, so irrigation wasn't even needed. The Intihuatana stone, possibly used for offerings and sacrifices to calculate the solstices, or a representation of Huayna Picchu. Number 4, the Temple of Condor, a natural cave that looks like the bird. It was the most sacred bird to the Incans, who believed it was the messenger for the heavens. 5. Huayna Picchu, a towering mountain overlooking Machu Picchu, which was likely the residence for the high priest and virgins. Number 6, the Temple of the Sun, where you can clearly see the distinct differences between the quality and craftsmanship used for the wall stones versus other less prestigious buildings. 7, the Royal Tomb, but apparently no bodies were ever found there. 8, the Temple of Three Windows. One theory is that the windows represent the underground, heaven, and the present. Number 9, the Principal Temple. While once adorned with countless artifacts, it's been a struggle for the Peruvian government to recover the thousands of appropriated heritage pieces from museums and universities around the world. Thankfully, in 2011, the University of Yale agreed to return over 5,000 of these taken during Bingham's expedition. And number 10, the view from the Sun Gate. It provides the most recognizable photo of the area and was the primary entry port to the ancient city. If you can, get here on the early morning tour and watch the sun cast first light onto the buildings below. The whole area is normally swarming with over 2,500 tourists a day. While there have been rumors about plans to close it to the public in the future, they are unfounded. One thing that interested me is when our tour guide mentioned that portions of the site had been reserved and unexcavated for future generations. Perhaps then, with better technology, we'll be able to reveal the truth behind so many of the questions we still have to this day. The Incans didn't have any formal system of writing, so most of what we know is from anecdotes from Spanish conquerors. Would I go back? This time, yes, absolutely. I'd love to do the Inca Road and spend more time in the country seeing the other highlights that I didn't get to see. It truly was this time a trip for the hiking adventure. The glorious colors of Rainbow Mountain and the Nazca lines still call to me. Peru has not seen the last of Josh Hill.